honest man, and I'll find something in them with which to hang them. The problem is they don't have 6 lines anymore, they have 6 billion lines. But beyond that, let's presume that you don't. Let's presume you are sort of the least offensive, the least intimidating to the government type of person out there. They don't want to influence your industry. You're not in a union. You're not politically active. All you do is you go home and you watch TV, and you pay your taxes. That's also very important. If that were the case, you have to think about what it actually means when you change the paradigm there, because you as a citizen don't need to justify why you need the right. Rather, it's incumbent on the government to make a demonstration why it is absolutely necessary to the public good to violate your rights. The burden of proof does not fall to you. And ultimately, when you think about the argument, you have to think about what they're trying to say and what it means. And when I look at it, it's no different to say, I don't care about the right to privacy because I have nothing to hide. That's no different than saying, I don't care about free speech because I have nothing to say. I don't care about freedom of the press because I have nothing to write. I don't care about freedom of association because I'm not involved with my community. I don't care about freedom of religion because I don't worship. But the problem is when you give up these fundamental freedoms, when you stop defending these general collective rights, you're actually shifting the character of democracy. When we think about the way that human rights work, they're not granted by governments. They're inherent to our nature. Government cannot simply say that, you can no longer speak, you can no longer express yourself. And the problem with this is the fact that we allow them to do that. We have subordinated ourselves in a new way. We have given up a measure of power that once we have done that, we have stopped becoming citizens and we have decreased ourselves into becoming subjects. Rather than becoming partner to government, we are subject to government. And that's a real danger because once you go down that road, once the government claims a new power, once they plant a new flag in the domain of your rights, your liberty, your private life, within the 4 walls of your home, your private friendships, your private records, it's very difficult to get them to go back. And once you've lost a certain degree of power, then you can no longer oppose that power. There can be no revolutionary political movement when the government knows what everybody's doing, what everybody is saying, what everybody is thinking. And when we think about what that means, I think we have to be very careful about simply assuming that I, the individual, can give up the rights for the collective. The majority can't vote away the rights for the majority. And we cannot give up the foundation of all rights. And that's really what privacy is. When you think about it, privacy is not about hiding something. Privacy is about protecting something. Privacy is about protecting liberty. The right to privacy is what provides freedom of association. It's what provides freedom of speech. It's what provides freedom of the press, because you cannot decide what you think, what you feel, what you want to be, what you want to become, what you want to share, if you can't think about it in the first place, if you can't develop it, if you can't make mistakes with people you trust, or friends, and experiment and live in law. So when you think about the right to privacy, what you really think about is the right to liberty.
And we talk about us as humans and those who are invading our rights. One of the things that I was really so struck by, looking through the documents, was that it used to be 10 years ago that here in Britain I should be most concerned about, GCHQ, our domestic law enforcement, possibly. But now my communications flow right around the world, right? And so my right to privacy can be infringed by the French, by the Germans, by the Chinese, by the Americans, by anyone. Whatever route my communication takes, it could be the case that every email I send is intercepted by 6 different intelligence agencies. Now, when you think about it in that way, and then you try and reconcile that with how our legal frameworks are trying to deal with this problem, it seems to me we've still got a fundamental issue here. In Britain, our law says if you're inside the UK, you get some protections, and if you're out, fair game. In the US, it's a similar state of affairs. If you're a US person, you get your protections, and if you're outside, we don't care. You know, how do we move from that, given that many of these agencies are there to collect foreign intelligence?
The first thing is we have to decide what the real nature of our right to privacy is. Not just what the right to privacy is, but what we want to protect, what we want to provide to everyone on a human rights basis. Because when we try to lobby for reform in Britain, that's one thing. We try to do the same thing in the UK, that's another thing. If you try to do the same thing in Africa, if you try to do the same thing in Asia, if you try to do the same thing in all different corners of the world, you run into a very different dynamic, which is that national laws are not always responsive to public good. And when you think about mass surveillance and the fact that it's never prevented a terrorist attack in the first place, you have to recognize these aren't public safety programs, these are spying programs. So is the cost to society, is the exposure that we all suffer as a result of leaving our communications insecure on the technical level, worth whatever political or procedural benefit they claim it is valuable in our country, in our given countries? And so the question, how do we resolve this tension, is actually quite clear, and that's that we cannot stop with a simple assertion of law that this will be the operation in our country. If, for example, the UK tomorrow, David Cameron wakes up and he decides, you know what, I'm a big fan of freedom now. You know, I really and we all know what represents for that. And it happens. It reforms the law. You know, everybody backs him. We have a renaissance of personal liberties in the United Kingdom. The problem is, as you say, as soon as you send your email, it goes all around the world into different regimes, into different legal structures that don't have the same laws. They don't recognize the same protections. They strip them away. What you have to do is find that thanks to advances in technology, we can now assert our rights through new means. We can use technical standards, we can use technical systems, we can use scientific advances in things like encryption, routing schemes, basically methods of encoding and protecting people's data across borders, so that when we improve things here, we don't just benefit those within our borders, we benefit everyone around the world.
Ed, you mentioned Cameron.
Do you think that NSA is intercepting David Cameron's emails?
Actually, a really interesting question, because there was a prominent congressman in the United States named Bernie Sanders, I believe he was the author of the letter, who wrote a letter to the director of the National Security Agency, and he said, are you intercepting the emails of Congress? Are you intercepting the emails of basically our government representatives? And the NSA director wrote back a very wordy reply that basically boiled down to, well, yes, of course. We're intercepting everyone's. So yes, David Cameron's in the databases alongside everybody else. And if the National Security Agency, the director, decides that he wants to look at it, he can. And in fact, this is actually codified into the agreements that they have with each other, one of which, a top secret agreement, was published by The Guardian, I believe, which showed that not only were they sharing information back and forth between each other, which that rubber stamp court in the UK finally said actually was unlawful for the past 7 years, but it also said that this is not a binding legal agreement. The restrictions that they placed on each other, saying, well, we're not going to break your laws, you're not going to break our laws, said explicitly, there's no legal force behind this. If you break it, we can't do anything about it. And then beyond that, at least for the United States version, but of course this is also the same for the UK and every other country that has a similar agreement, it has a section classified no foreign. No foreign being a spook speak, basically, for no foreign nationals. It means only the citizens of that country can view this clause of the agreement. And that clause said that if, for example, the National Security Agency considered it to be in the interests of the United States government they would happily abrogate that agreement. They would happily basically search through David Cameron's email, listen to his cell phone calls, or anybody else in the UK, despite the fact that they had agreed not to do so. And they would have no obligation to inform the other party, and that other party would have no legal recourse even if it were discovered.
Sounds like a great